British Foreign Minister Boris Johnson has announced his resignation. He's the third minister to quit in just 24 hours, with all three refusing to back Theresa May's plans for a soft Brexit. Johnson's departure follows the resignation of Brexit Secretary David Davis and Under-Secretary Steve Baker. We can go live now to our correspondent in London, Hanisha Sethi. Hanisha, can you bring us up to date with all the developments, please?
Well, the UK Prime Minister is facing a tense meeting with Tory MPs and her peers at Parliament today, as she'll want to try and keep control of her cabinet amidst all the infighting, and her leadership is at a huge risk. The infighting surrounds May's idea for a facilitated customs arrangement. That's her plan in securing a trade deal once the UK leaves the EU in March 2019. Now, the reason Brexiteers are angry is because the current plan is a soft Brexit and closely aligned with EU rules. And May's having trouble balancing her cabinet, and this is what has led to all these resignations in the past 24 hours. But the Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson, an influential figure, the face actually of the Vote Leave campaign in 2016, he was meant to give a press conference at the Western Balkan Summit in London, but Downing Street put out a statement saying that Theresa May had accepted his resignation. But Theresa May's balancing act is not going so well in Parliament at the moment. Let's take a listen.
But I want to recognise the work of the former Secretary of State for exiting the European Union, to recognise the passion that the former Foreign Secretary demonstrated in promoting
Order! A very unseemly atmosphere. I want to hear about these important matters. And I think the House should. The Prime Minister.
Thank you. That the former Foreign Secretary demonstrated in promoting a global Britain to the world as we leave the European Union.
Well, despite these eruptions of laughter, Theresa May's spokesperson has said that the government isn't in meltdown, and there's no question of revisiting the position that was agreed in Chequers on Friday. Eruptions of laughter there, but Jeremy Corbyn, leader of the Labour Party, has actually mocked May's claim that she's restored cabinet responsibility over this.
From previous discussions.
2 years on from the referendum, 16 months on from Article 50 being triggered, it's only this weekend that the Cabinet managed to agree a negotiating position among itself. And that illusion lasted 48 hours.
Well, Jeremy Corbyn has said that he understands why cabinet ministers didn't actually resign on Friday, because their phones were removed, they would have lost their cars because of government cuts, and there would have been no bus service as well. But there were also reports of MPs saying that they were on standby on Friday, ready to pick MPs up if they resigned. And in under 24 hours, though, we've seen the resignation of David Davis as well, the Brexit Secretary. He said that Theresa May had given away too much too easily when he resigned on Sunday night, and he'll be replaced now by Dominic Raab, a prominent Leave campaigner in the 2016 referendum. But a public poll, the ORB poll, shows the approval of public Brexit negotiations has seen a significant fall in July, the lowest on record. And last month, 36% of the public approved current negotiations. Now this has dropped to 29%, so a significant fall there. But the resignations of two of the cabinet's leading ministers leaves Theresa cabinet now in a very much tenuous position.
Hanisha Sethi speaking to us live from London. Thank you for keeping across this for us. We'll be coming back to you shortly, I'm sure. Thank you for now. OK, we can now cross live to our guest, former Mayor of London, Ken Livingstone. Mr Livingstone, always lovely to have you on the programme. I want to ask, what's your initial reaction to Boris Johnson's resignation?
Well, I'm not surprised. I mean, David Davis, who resigned yesterday, a man of absolute integrity. I remember I was in Parliament with him when he resigned his seat in protest, causing a by-election to protest against the erosion of human rights by the government of the day. And he's always been principled. But Boris Johnson has always just been about promoting himself, wanting a senior position, wanting to be Prime Minister one day. So if David Davis hadn't quit, Boris would still be in there. Boris knows, though, if there is going to be a leadership challenge to Theresa May, he's got to lead the cabinet to do that.
Now, what we're seeing is 3 resignations within 24 hours, people talking about the government being in full-blown crisis. Meanwhile, Theresa May's spokesman says there's no question of revisiting the Brexit position agreed by the cabinet at Chequers on Friday, and that the government is not in meltdown. What's your take on the cabinet statement?
Well, but basically, when Theresa May seemed to have pulled this all off, we were all quite surprised that she'd managed to keep the cabinet together, accepting effectively a sort of limited remaining in the single market. But the simple fact is, I mean, will the EU, the other 27 nations, agree with her position? I suspect they will demand further concessions, and so she will start losing more and more of her ministers. I mean, the simple fact is I can't ever recall a time in my life when the politics of the British government has been in such chaos and with complete impossibility to try and understand where we'll be in 3 months or 6 months or next year. Will the government survive? We don't know. Will we actually vote to leave? We don't know. Literally, I've never known such uncertainty in all my time in politics, and frankly, I suspect it's going to be a huge impact on our economy. What foreign corporation is going to be thinking of investing in Britain when all of this is up in the air?
Absolutely. I was just about to ask you, how do you think Europe is viewing all of this going on at the moment?
Well, I think the simple fact is that they wouldn't be happy with the deal that Theresa May was offering. I mean, they're totally committed to those principles of a free market for services, goods, and the free movement of labour. And the simple fact is, Theresa May is terrified of offering free movement of labour because she thinks then perhaps the majority of Tory MPs would vote to get rid of her because that they fear the backlash from the voters if we don't try and tighten our borders to keep foreigners out. And this is becoming a very unpleasant and sort of nasty debate, frankly. And the simple fact is the majority of immigrants who come to Britain don't come from the EU, they come from the rest of the world. And if the government wanted to reduce migration, it could stop all of that. But they don't. And the reason is migrants bring dynamism to your economy. 70% of the migrants who come to Britain come with a university degree, whereas in Britain only about a quarter of people have got a degree. And more migrants have come to London than any other part of Britain, and London is the only part of Europe that matches American levels of productivity and competitiveness. We now live in a global world. If we think we can start raising barriers again, well, we're just mad.
And all this turmoil really couldn't have come at a worse time for Theresa May, could it? With everything she has on her plate at the minute, with the US president coming over to visit very shortly, and also with the country dealing with this second nerve agent incident. I mean, is this the perfect time for resignations if they want a vote of no confidence against May?
Well, literally, Theresa May has had a difficult time their entire time as Prime Minister because it's taken 2 years to get this really scrappy deal, and now members of the Cabinet are dropping out. There'll be quite a lot of backbenchers opposing it. The simple fact, though, is there's most probably a majority in Parliament in favour of retaining some sort of deal like this. So getting her out won't be as easy as Boris Johnson thinks. And for Boris Johnson, that's all this is about. Basically, although he campaigned to leave, he was absolutely shocked when that result came in. And most of us thought he's only campaigning to leave because he wants to get the support of the hardline Brexiteer Tory MPs for when the next leadership challenge comes.
Should Theresa May choose to step down, or should a vote of no confidence not be beyond the realms of possibility right now? What's the possibility, do you think, that someone new would really be able to bring the two warring sides of the party together?
It just isn't possible. There is no one person on either side who can unite the Tory party around this issue. I mean, it's the most divisive issue. It takes me back to the 1990s when our then Tory Prime Minister, John Major, was trying to preside over a Tory party totally divided in Parliament over whether or not we should join the common currency. And at the end of his term, you had a Labour landslide. And I think most probably Theresa May limp on till the next general election, but that could be later this year. I think, looking at the mess in the Tory party now, it's much more likely that it will be Jeremy Corbyn as a Labour Prime Minister who will then negotiate a better deal with the EU.
Well, given that the Labour Party are just as divided as the Conservatives on this anyway, do you think Labour really could do a better job?
Well, again, if you actually look back, there was only about 2 or 3% of Labour MPs voted to leave because they all knew leaving the EU is going to damage our economy, it will cost us jobs, there'll be less investment coming to Britain. So we've got to get that across to people, and I think we can. Everything that's come out in the last 2 years has been bad news. Most businesses are criticising the government. Nothing's got better in our economy. We're limping along with a pitiful rate of growth. Wages are falling behind inflation. We've had the worst 10 years in our economic history. You've got to go back to the time of Napoleon for a period as bad as this in our economy. That's not a vote winner.
So, where do we go with the Brexit process from here? I mean, according to Jeremy Corbyn, it's just been 2 years of time wasted with the cabinet infighting. What's the next step from here?
Well, Jeremy's absolutely right. They could have had this decision 2 years ago, immediately after the Brexit vote. But it's been stalled and stalled and stalled. We're now just a few months away from the point at which we leave. So it's absolutely chaotic. And I mean, I've tried always to avoid lying in my political career. And I have to tell you, not just me, but I don't think anybody in politics has any idea where we're going to be in 3 or 4 months' time. I wouldn't bet a penny on anything coming out of this. It is absolutely chaotic.
Do you think we'll see more resignations in the coming hours?
I'm sure there'll be some more coming in, but the two big names have now gone, and they're lining up behind backbench critics like Jacob Rees-Mogg. So I do think there's going to be groups of Tory MPs meeting tonight talking about, shall we trigger a leadership election? Shall we vote to block this going through Parliament? And that, of course, if you've got a big chunk of Tory rebels, means the decision comes into the hand of Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party with what they do in that vote.
Ken Livingstone, former Mayor of London, thank you for joining us on RT. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
With Tory MPs and her peers at Parliament today, as she'll want to try and keep control of her cabinet amidst all the infighting, and her leadership is at a huge risk. The infighting surrounds May's idea for a facilitated customs arrangement. That's her plan in securing a trade deal once the UK leaves the EU in March 2019. Now, the reason Brexiteers are angry is because the current plan is a soft Brexit and closely aligned with EU rules, and May's having trouble balancing her cabinet, and this is what
British Foreign Minister Boris Johnson has announced his resignation. He's the third minister to quit in just 24 hours, with all three refusing to back Theresa May's plans for a soft Brexit. Johnson's departure follows the resignation of Brexit Secretary David Davis and Under Secretary Steve Baker. We can go live now to our correspondent in London, Hanisha Sethi. Hanisha, can you bring us up to date with all the developments, please?
Well, the UK Prime Minister is facing a tense meeting
as we leave the European Union.
Well, despite these eruptions of laughter, Theresa May's spokesperson has said that the government isn't in meltdown, and there's no question of revisiting the position that was agreed in Chequers on Friday. Eruptions of laughter there, but Jeremy Corbyn, leader of the Labour Party, has actually mocked May's claim that she's restored cabinet responsibility over this.
From previous discussions.
2 years on from the referendum, 16 months on from Article 50.
This is what has led to all these resignations in the past 24 hours. But the Foreign Secretary, Boris Johnson, an influential figure, the face actually of the Vote Leave campaign in 2016, he was meant to give a press conference at the Western Balkan Summit in London. But Downing Street put out a statement saying that Theresa May had accepted his resignation. But Theresa May's balancing act is not going so well in in Parliament at the moment. Let's take a listen.
But I want to recognise the work of the former Secretary of State for exiting the European Union, to recognise the passion that the former Foreign Secretary demonstrated in promoting
Order! A very unseemly atmosphere. I want to hear about these important matters. And I think the House should. The Prime Minister.
Thank you. That the former Foreign Secretary demonstrated in promoting a global Britain to the world.